Hi everyone, my name is Kirsten, the owner of Serious Stitchery, and I wanted to go over how I use a floss prism. So I think there might be a couple questions out there about how to actually use them. So I'm going to go through a couple different examples of some patterns, some easy, some more complex, and talk about how I use the floss prisms. So I'll start with a simple example. So I am currently stitching a long dog sampler variant of interest. It's a beautiful pattern, but I'm stitching it monochrome. So I am just using one color of DMC, and that makes it really easy, right? I can grab my floss prism, I can thread up. I do 8 needles at a time, pre-thread 8 of the same color on there. I'll wrap them around my floss prism. I'll stitch. When I'm done, I have an empty needle. I will just stick it right back in my floss prism. And then I will pick up the next thread, pull it off, and continue stitching. When I'm done with it, I will stick it back in the floss prism and continue on my way. So that would be a very simple example of a monochrome one color thread stitching project. So that's usually not the case, right? You're usually stitching with multiple colors of thread and floss. So what would we do in that case? You do not have to pre-thread every single color and every single needle. So if you are doing a full coverage piece and you have like 300 colors, right, you don't have to pre-thread every single one. I would recommend choosing a couple colors, right? Maybe pick the next 3 or 4 colors that you see yourself stitching and pre-thread those, right? Doing one at a time just takes forever, right? You kind of get in the rhythm of cross stitching, and then you run out of thread and you have to stop and go grab more thread and thread the needle and then pick your piece back up. To be more efficient with your time and pre-thread a bunch of stuff at once, it makes it more enjoyable for me. So I'm going to show you how I would think about pre-threading my needles with a couple different patterns. And these patterns are free. I got them from dmc.com. So let's hop online. I'll show you those patterns and talk about how I would go about pre-threading my needles and using my floss prism with those projects. So let's look at how I would use the floss prism with a couple different patterns. So I found some free patterns on DMC's website and downloaded 2 of them. This first one is bees. It says be happy. On here you can see there's not a ton of colors. It's not super complicated or anything like that. So in terms of using the floss prism, depending on where you start, let's say you start in the middle, so you would be starting around this T color, which is 3824. So what I would do if I was going to start here, I would probably do the whole word happy. I might hit B next and then try this flower. So what I might do is I might pre-thread 3824 on probably 2 or 3 needles and wrap them around my floss prism. And then I would probably also pre-thread this color here, which is 351. And then I might thread one needle with this color 3752. So I'm not pre-threading every single color and every single needle that I'm using. I'm thinking about where I'm starting, what colors I'm going to stitch next, and then pre-threading a few of those ahead of time. I can fit about 8 needles on, but you don't have to put 8 needles on there. You could do 3 or 4, or if you don't want to get too crazy, maybe just do 2. But I find that pre-threading the next few colors that I'm using makes it a little more enjoyable for me for not having to stop and pre-thread a needle every single time. So let's say we get down to the B, right? I would probably thread one needle with 8 I'd probably do one needle with this yellow 3822, one needle with 3854, and then I might do a couple needles with this U, which is the Blanc color, and the 762F. So since there's more stitches with these colors, I'd probably thread 2 or 3 needles with those specific colors ahead of time. Like I said, I'm not pre-threading every single needle. I'm just looking ahead at, what I'm going to stitch next and thinking about, what colors need to be used there and pre-threading a few of those colors just so that they're more easily accessible to me. So now let's move to a more complex pattern. This is also a free pattern on DMC's website for Starry Night. Starry Night is one of my favorite pieces by Van Gogh. So I thought this one was really pretty. It's more of like a full coverage piece. So the way that I would go about stitching this, depending on where you're starting, I would probably start in the top left and work my way down with just the way that I stitch. So in looking at this, I would pick a couple colors. So this ampersand, the dark blue and white star, the hashtag symbol, right? I would find those colors. So our ampersand is 820, the star is 797, and the hashtag is 799. So I would probably start by pre-threading maybe just one of each of those colors to get started. I might do some of these like yellows as well. So looking at these symbols, maybe choosing, this symbol here, 3078, 972, maybe doing one of each of those. When you have a ton of colors and it's more of like a full coverage piece where you're, bopping around the whole piece in terms of keeping them organized on my Floss Prism, that's why I wouldn't do all the colors at once. So I would choose a couple in this case, maybe 3 or 4 colors, pre-thread probably one of each because it kind of looks like a bunch of confetti stitching, and then stitch those up. So I'm not pre-threading every single color with every single needle that I'm ever going to use for this project. I'm just picking a couple, thinking of what I'm going to stitch next, and pre-threading those colors so that they're available to me. I don't have to keep stopping what I'm doing, pulling out my thread, getting one piece of floss out, threading it, stitching it. Then when I'm done, I have to go back to my thread, find the next color, pull a piece of floss out, thread it, and go. I can do that at one time to make my life a little bit more efficient. And then I can, stitch those couple colors up in one go. And then once I'm done with that, look at where I'm headed next, pick the next couple colors, and go on from there. So I hope that helped you think about how to use a floss prism and how you might use a floss prism with your projects. Like I said, I don't pre-thread every single color and every single needle, right? I usually just keep like 6 to 8 needles per project, and one floss prism per project. I don't have like 10 floss prisms per project with a whole bunch of stuff pre-threaded, right? It's just one at a time, like one floss prism, one project with a couple needles. And I just look ahead, think about what colors I'm going to be utilizing next, and then wrapping those around my prism and going. Also, in terms of keeping track of which colors are on my floss prism, that's also why I don't pre-thread a bunch of different multiple colors at once. Just pick 3 or 4, thread a couple of each, and then go on your way. So I hope that helped clarify how to use a floss prism and how I use them in my stitching. I hope that you could potentially see the benefit of saving you a little bit of time and making your stitching more enjoyable. So feel free to check out the floss prisms that we have. I recommend just giving it a try. Just get one, try it, see if you like it. They're pretty inexpensive, and go from there. So I hope this video helped clarify some questions, and I'll see you next time.